Dele Alli. The minute his career is
Okay.
going in the wrong direction.
I'm not saying he has to do loads of running because you don't put Mesut Ozil in the team to do that. But when you give him the ball, he's got to make things happen. And yeah, I always felt that whenever Arsenal played in those games, they were always effectively playing with, one less man.
I think he's very concerned with Pogba, the player. I honestly don't think he's concerned about Manchester United.
Hello and welcome to the Midtable and Up Podcast. Today we're doing Wasted Potential. And speaking of wasted potential, my first guest that is joining me today has all the attributes to become a pilot, but instead enjoys playing Flight Simulator. It's Matthew Lee, everyone. Hello, Matthew.
Hi, George. Thank you very much for that kind introduction to say I have capability
I'm
in
glad
anything. That's very sweet.
I'm glad you think so.
Well, I was glad you think so. I was worried was
My
coming
other
back.
host this evening is a man that has the capability to turn things around for Ipswich, but instead spends his time playing FIFA and The Witcher 3. It's Simon Bartlett. You okay, Simon?
Yeah, I'm good. Well, my Ipswich team have been all conquering for the last several years, mate. It's an unbeatable team. Got Mbappe, Greenwood, there's some great players in there.
Oh, love it. I love it.
Talk about players with potential. They haven't wasted theirs on my FIFA. So anyway.
Oh yeah, mate. I bet. And of course, then you have myself, a man who is capable of writing a best-selling novel, but instead chooses to spend his time ranting about the West Ham United owners on Twitter. So we're all the same in this boat. None of us are fulfilling our potential.
I think you can make a novel of your tweets to the West Ham board. To be honest with you. That would be a good
you know
read,
what? You probably could. You probably could make a novel out of my tweets.
PhD.
I wrote enough tweets about them and articles as well. So yeah, you probably could write a novel out of my tweets about David Sullivan and David Gold. God, I hate those people. So in terms of the format today, we're doing something a little bit different. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through our lists like we normally would, but instead of us reading out our entire list all at one go, we're each going to be going through our number 10s and discussing them accordingly, and then moving on to number 9s, and then 8s, 7s, etc., etc. So, with that all out of the way, Matt, who would you say is your number 10 player that wasted their potential? Who is bang on mid-table?
Bang on mid-table is a player that I think I would definitely count as wasted potential, but hasn't had the worst career out of everyone else on this list.
Yeah.
So
okay.
they sit at 10th because, they were prophesized to be amazing. And they've done some great things in their career. It's Theo Walcott.
Okay.
So obviously he started off at Southampton and had, extended times at Arsenal during the mid of his career, and Everton. Really he was plagued by injuries and then struggled to kind of come back at form at times. So that's why he sits in mid-table. Not at all saying that he's an awful player or that, I think with wasted potential, you could go in, you could say for some reason, this player's wasted potential because, they were just lazy, for example.
Yeah.
He's not that. He's just had kind of a bad run of luck with injuries.
I kind of exactly get where you're coming from, to be honest, because he's one of them where for years it felt like we were just waiting for him to hit his peak, waiting for him to really hit his peak. It always felt like he was super young. I still can't believe, what is he now, like 32, 33, something
Maybe
like
not
that?
even that.
It's a bit scary when you realise that's how old he is.
I still can't believe that's how old he is. And you kind of think that, as I said, for so long, everyone was kind of just sitting there waiting for him to become almost a 20 goal a season type winger, because he certainly had the attributes, he had the pace, Would you guys, I think with Theo Walcott, would you guys kind of say that he almost had too much thrust upon him at too early in an age? You know, he went to that World Cup in 2006. He hadn't even played for Arsenal at that point. And, you know, I feel like the weight of the world was probably always on his shoulders in that regard, to be honest. So,
that was just it was a baffling decision at the time, and it was baffling. It was
definitely, Sven definitely got that wrong.
Watched play. You'd only seen videos of him. And look, he had raw pace and power, not power, but he had lots of pace. He had the ability to run through, but he was dangerous. I always say in the World Cup squad, you needed someone who is a bit of an unknown quantity.
Bit of a wild card.
He wasn't the guy for that, was he? I mean, there were better options to be that wild card, let's be honest.
No, it was way too soon.
And as you say, I think he had the ability to be a better player than he was. It was always that final ball. He just never delivered the consistency in that final pass, the final shot, to really reach the levels that was expected of him early in his career. But again, I think going into that England squad at that age,
I
made
completely
people think
agree.
he was going to be world class. And I don't know. I don't think I ever saw that ability from him.
Yeah, no,
but the expectation was raised so high.
The thing is, I think for a while he kind of lived on that hat-trick against, for pretty much his whole career, he lived on that hat-trick against Croatia. And there was loads of little periods in his career where, you know, he'd maybe get 6 goals in 7 games or something, and then you sat there thinking, right, he's going to go on and progress now, and he's going to become, you know, 20 goals a season from the wing, and his final ball is going to start delivering sort of in a similar kind of way that Adama Traore has come on in the last couple of years or so. But as soon as Theo Walcott always looked like he was going to get to that point, there'd then be another injury, and then it would be back to square one, and then he'd never really recover from that. So to be honest with you, I think number 10 personally, I think that's a great shout. Straight out the gate, Theo Walcott. I certainly think he could have probably got more out of his career than he did. You know, obviously injuries did play a big part, and that's always difficult to overcome. But yeah, I think that's a great shout.
George, what did you have as number 10?
So for my number 10, and I'm going to admit before I even say. This is very controversial. Very controversial. I would say both my number 10. I think both my number 10 and number 9 are. So for number 10. I have gone with Mesut Ozil. I was wondering
someone would have him.
Wow.
I had him on a list, a short list of potential people. So
he was on my short list too. Yeah.
Okay, so that makes me feel a little bit better about going with Mesut Ozil. But basically, the thing.
But hold on, we didn't put him on our list, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. So let me explain my way of thinking in this. And again, I know there's probably some Arsenal fans out there that are probably
I reckon you're going to get hate mail for the rest of the week.
But mate, I welcome it. You know. But the thing with Mesut Ozil, as I said, you can't deny that he has achieved great things in the game, because of course he has. He's won a World Cup. I can't believe I put a World Cup winner on this list, to be honest with you. But obviously, you know, everything he did at Real Madrid, the assists that he got there, I do kind of think, you know, he did a great job at that club, and obviously he won the World Cup. You know, Ronaldo didn't want him to leave when he went to Arsenal. But I just think having gone to Arsenal, and I know to be fair to him, I will say this, they really had problems defensively as much as anything. But I just think he was the caliber of player that could elevate them to, you know, potentially title success. And of course, you do need the foundations behind him in order to do that. I'm not denying that at all. But I think on the big games, and I would even say this was the same when Germany won the World Cup, he would always disappear. He would really always disappear. He would never be there for the big games. And you kind of think he had the ability and he had the talent to take those games by the scruff of the neck. But you always kind of felt that he'd rather be a Robin to someone else's Batman. In many cases, that would be either Ronaldo at Real Madrid or Sanchez at Arsenal. And obviously, Sanchez left. They gave him that big money contract. And I kind of thought, right, this is the time for him now to really step up. And, you know, I think they did. Yeah, I think they did give him the captaincy around that time. So, and just to not have that, you know, I just think it's not, as I said, he's obviously achieved a lot in his career. So that's why he's a lot lower on the list, because let's be real, he has achieved great things in his career. He has got loads of assists in the Premier League, but again, he's very good at smashing the smaller teams, rather than, I just kind of feel the only big game I can really remember him having an impact was when they played Man United and Arsenal were like 3-0 up at half time. I think he got a goal or maybe a couple of assists in that game, but outside of that, when they're getting battered 6-0 by the Chelseas and City are putting 5 past them, that kind of thing. You need your player of that caliber to be the guy that's going to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and to influence it. I'm not saying he has to do loads of running because you don't put Mesut Ozil in the team to do that. But when you give him the ball, he's got to make things happen. And I always felt that whenever Arsenal played in those games, they were always effectively playing with, one less man, because he was having such little of an impact. So that is my number 10. As I said, I think it's very, very controversial. I could definitely see why you guys wouldn't have put him on your list because, as I said, it's probably a bit harsh. But as I said, at the same time, I think he definitely could have got more out of his Arsenal career than he has done, in my opinion.
So to talk on why he didn't make Alice and Simon come in here if as and when. The reason for me why he didn't make the list is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I feel like there's a couple of reasons. When we talk about wasted potential, what he achieved in the earlier years of his career, and when I say earlier years, I mean,
completely.
If we go back
to the 2010 World Cup, mate, even
If we-
before that, man, the 2010 World Cup, he was unbelievable for Germany, and that was what ultimately got him his move to Real Madrid.
But if you would be sitting here thinking like you're crazy. So I think there's been a lot of problems at Arsenal, and personally, I think a lot of that energy of disappointment has been directed towards Mesut Ozil, and in some cases, unfairly.
No.
Does he run the most miles, the kilometres? Does he do all that stuff? No, he doesn't. But in an Arsenal side in 2020 that's just flat out struggling to create chances, which is what it is, they've got great finishers, but they're not getting enough opportunities to score. Someone like Mesut Ozil will really come into that squad and can do that. I appreciate he's come across as lazy. Giving him the big money contract has also kind of magnified the issue. It's a kind of similar situation to how people talk about Harry Maguire. People expect the big things for Harry Maguire because he costs £80 million. If you look at Harry Maguire in that Leicester squad, he's the same Harry Maguire that's in Manchester United.
I mean, to be
it's
fair,
just been the expectation's bigger.
I mean, obviously the expectation is bigger, but I would say that on the flip side of that, Harry Maguire was in much better form while he played for Leicester, hence how he earned that move. And in terms of Mesut Ozil, I definitely take your point in the sense that you have to look at the rest of the team as well. No Premier League title winner has come through one player on their own. No, you need other components of the team to also be working well. I just think that when you put someone on that 350k a week bracket, when it's your talisman, they need to be the one that are, firing on all cylinders constantly. And if you could look through the rest of the team, the team and say, oh, look, they're not up to his level, whatever, and, they're still losing games and they're still not, maybe qualifying for Champions League, maybe winning titles. If you could sit there and say that Mesut Ozil had done everything that he could and, it was just the rest of the team that was letting him down, then I'd have no qualms with what he's done at Arsenal and I'd hold my hands up and say, you know what, fair enough, brilliant player for them, but, he's just not been in a team that's good enough. But ultimately, I don't think he's got the best out of what
I would say, though, is that 350k a week was not given to him because
Simon.
he was worth 350k a week. They just lost Alexis Sanchez, and they couldn't afford publicly to be seen to be losing another one of their star players. It was nothing to do with they thought he was worth 350k a week. He had Arsenal over a barrel, basically. They'd already lost one of their star men, and now they were about to lose another one.
And he had a bloody good agent.
An insane contract. That's not his fault. I mean, he's a professional at the end of the day. He needs to...
Oh, no, if you're in the same position, you would definitely do that. But even beyond the money, I do think that he's still a talisman,
I agree with that.
Was supposed to be a talismanic figure that's never... Even when he was in really good form, as I said, there was a season when he nearly broke the assist record, didn't he? And as I said, smashing all these little teams, like no worries at all, no drama there. But then as soon as the big boys would roll into town, they'd still get flattened 4, 5, 6s against the Chelseas, the Cities, those kinds of teams, Liverpools. It just wasn't good enough, really. And as I said, it wasn't like he was playing out of his skin and the rest of the team was letting him down. So, yeah, that's why I went with Mesut Ozil at number 10. As I said, obviously he did achieve, great things at Real Madrid and obviously won the World Cup with Germany. Even though I don't think he was very instrumental in that particular World Cup anyway. That's part of the reason why I put him in there.
He did start most of the matches at that tournament, if I remember rightly.
He did start most. I think he did start most, if not all of them. But I don't remember him really having too much of an impact on them.
But the thing is, if you have people like Tony Cruz and all these guys in a squad,
yeah, exactly, they had enough match winners in that squad.
Yeah, he's the one that looks like the small fry, right? Even though in comparison, he's still
yeah. They had like Tony Cruz, Thomas Muller, obviously all playing out of their skin in those games. So maybe they did overshadow him somewhat. But as I don't really remember him. Whereas in 2010. He really took that World Cup by storm. He was one of the players of the tournament, in my opinion. In 2014, I felt he was kind of just there. Not, as I said, didn't really do anything wrong, but at the same time, he certainly wasn't hitting the heights that Muller, Cruz did that tournament, in my opinion. So, that's my number 10. Simon, who are you going for your number 10?
So my number 10 is probably a player who his career never ignited, and you could probably argue maybe didn't have the potential to warrant being on this list, but I've chosen him anyway because I think his story was interesting. Saido Berahino, if you remember him.
Nice shout. I do remember Berahino. I do remember Berahino. He was an absolute, I want to say, had a car crash of a career.
Yeah, because it looked so promising. He was 18, 19. He was playing for West Brom.
18, 19. England under 21s. He definitely had a full senior squad, at least call up. He might have even got a cap or two. I think.
He's got 15 to 20 goals. I think for West Brom that season. They hadn't done very well because obviously it was West Brom. There was talk of big money moves all over the place. He was definitely a difference maker. Obviously, talk of England call-ups.
Well, he nearly went to Spurs, didn't he, for 30 million quid? He nearly went to Spurs. That's how hyped he was.
Yeah, so as I say, he's getting all of this pressure and all these call-ups coming up, and everyone's saying, look, this is England's future centre-forward. This is long before I think even Harry Kane had kind of burst on the scene as well.
Oh, it was. So, it was about 2-3 years before Harry Kane had come along.
People were saying that this is going to be the guy to take over from Wayne Rooney, and he's going to be England's centre-forward for the next kind of 15, 20 years. And he can't be that old. I don't know what age he is at now.
No, his career has absolutely fallen by the wayside. I did do some research. He must be 26 or 27 right about now. He was born in 1993. So
there you go. I mean, he should be coming into the peak of his powers when you look at his footballing career.
Exactly.
And I think he's out in Turkey, isn't he, now?
Hang on, actually, I've actually got his list of clubs here. At the minute, so he went from West Brom to Stoke, and then he went, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of these clubs, to Zolta Waragum and Charleroi. So big hitters there. Yeah.
By the way, I want that clipped up for the start of the show.
I do 100% agree with you on your inclusion of him in the list because I've done a lot of looking into players that I kind of thought didn't quite make it, and I completely agree. For a while, I think there was a good maybe year or so that I kind of thought that he was just going to be at the very least a regular in the England setup. I remember he scored against us a couple of times.
He may not be an absolute starter, but he would certainly be in the squad. He would certainly be in and around the team. And now at 27...
100%. I thought he was going to be. I thought he looked great when he burst onto the scene around 20... it was around 2012, 2013, 2014, that kind of area. He was playing for West Brom, playing for Stoke, that kind of thing.
And now at 27...
he had didn't he have a lot of issues off the pitch as well?
I was going to mention
this. He had to go to court for a couple of things.
Yeah, he's been to court. He had some issues, I believe, with gambling as well, as a lot of players seem to do.
That old pitfall.
I know. In 2012, he was convicted of being drunk in charge of a vehicle.
That's always fun.
A couple of times as well.
I hate it when that happens.
So, banned for driving for 30 months. And, I don't know, his career just seemed to nosedive. I think once he was linked with those moves, I think that's when it started tailing off for him. Because he didn't get the move. Yeah. And then he seemed to stop playing well. obviously the moves then
Well,
started.
that was the thing, because I think for me completely, because I do remember I thought at the time that he had the talent and the ability, but for me his attitude is probably the reason why he is where he is now, because I just remember it being absolutely atrocious. Yeah. As you said, he got linked with those big clubs like Spurs. He got linked with Spurs. They were talking something around the region of 30 million.
Which for 2012, that was a much bigger fee than it is now.
Exactly. Exactly. Like around 2012 to 20, pre-Pogba to Man United, that's a lot more money than what it is in football today. And I've got to kind of give credit to West Brom. They dug their heels in and weren't bullied by the bigger club. They didn't cave in, but then probably would have been better off selling him in hindsight, because he then basically threw a massive strop, Berahino, never really performed for them. And there was a point really when I think Stoke was still in the Premier League that he went on an outrageous streak without scoring or assisting at all.
So he got three goals for Stoke.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think he played the whole Premier League season without scoring as they were relegated and didn't score till they were in the Championship.
Yeah.
And obviously by then all the big moves had kind of dried up. And he switched international allegiance to Burundi as well, because obviously his international career completely folded. No one in England was even talking about Saido Berahino anymore.
No one was going to touch him with a barge pole, because he just came across like a rotten egg, really. And as I said, it was such a shame, because the talent and the potential was definitely there for Berahino. But as I said, he's probably one of the few on all of our lists that is purely there through their own attitude.
I don't know. I've got another one.
Any kind of unlucky. Well, okay. So I look forward to that. But rather than a bit of bad luck with certain injuries, and certain players maybe tried a few things that didn't work or whatever. But yeah, I think he's probably I think I've got a couple as well in a similar vein. But in terms of attitude, I think that's definitely been the defining factor.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout for sure. So. All right, then, let's stroll on to our number 9s. Matthew, who have you got for your number 9?
So this one kind of pains me a little bit, because he's a player that arguably who came to West Ham. It happens a lot with us, right? But I'm
gonna have a guess right now and say it's Ravel Morrison.
That would be my guess.
It is Ravel Morrison. Yeah. I mean, I like as more of a personality. I don't want it to be a comment on the person, but
I do think that was an issue, though. His personality, I do think, was probably, again, the same as Berahino. I think the personality and the off-field antics was the biggest thing that held him back. But go on,
I guess what I meant by that was, I like him as a player a little bit.
He was a brilliant player.
He's got that rough edge to him, and that's a bit about what I like to see in a player. But from a professionalism standpoint, and from what he achieved in the game, it never really worked.
Didn't Alex Ferguson?
He was tipped for greatness by Alex Ferguson.
I was going to say.
Oh, snap!
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't Alex Ferguson describe him as the best young player he'd ever seen, or something? It was.
Yeah, I think he genuinely said that he thought he was better than Scholes at like a young age. He really hyped him up, and even when they sold him to us, West Ham, Alex Ferguson was disappointed to see him slip through the cracks, but ultimately didn't believe in his ability, to turn his off-field life around, and clearly that came to pass.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think that some of the off pitch issues definitely had an effect, and that was really the great cause of it. I'm not sure what Alex Ferguson, obviously he looks at the talent, right? He didn't look at the future and what that player would have. But I don't want it to be a reflection of my thoughts on Ravel Morrison, because I do like Ravel Morrison looking back at the time he had with us, even though he didn't necessarily do a lot for us, but as a player, you know what I mean? He's a bit of a cult. I don't want to call him a cult hero, but it's almost a bit of that.
He played off the cuff, and he played street football, didn't he, really?
Yeah.
He left everything out there, and he was super entertaining to watch. He was one of those players where whenever the ball was at his feet, you just felt that something was going to happen, something out of the ordinary. So, yeah, I 100% get why you've put Ravel Morrison on your list at number 9. So if I'm going to go, I don't know if anyone else has got anything else they want to add to that for the time being, but my number 9, I feel like... go for it, mate.
I was going to say, Ravel Morrison, the reason he didn't make my list is partly because I knew you two would probably have him, and as West Ham fans would probably talk more about him. But he's a guy where, Alex Ferguson, if he can't tame a player, he's absolutely untamable.
Yeah.
Like, there was absolutely no way.
100%,
If Fergie can't get it out of you, then there was no way he was going to have a good
100%.
career. Because Ferguson was the ultimate man manager. He got the best out of a lot of players who had a reputation for being kind of temperamental. You look at kind of Eric Cantona, got the best out of a player like that, who had a bit of a hothead. But Ravel Morrison, even he found was too difficult. And I think that kind of proves his attitude and the reason why he was never going to make it in the game.
No, I think that's a really great point. Yeah, I think it's a great point. Ultimately, he never really achieved what his potential could have been. But love the guy, nutter, but love him. So yeah, that's my number 9. So Simon, what's your number 9?
So my number 9 is again this bit of an older one now, but I think George will maybe remember him. So my number 9, a bit older this one, but I think George will remember him. Matt, probably a bit before your time. But do you remember Adriano?
God, yes.
Yeah, so
yes,
he's in at number 9 for me.
Yeah.
This was a guy...
I did consider him, to be honest.
He was considered to be the next Ronaldo, not Cristiano Ronaldo, but being Brazilian... Ronaldo.
Yeah.
The
R9 Ronaldo.
The Ronaldo.
Fat Ronaldo.
He was a big, strong lad. He was good on the ball. He was a good finisher. He could head it. He was strong, powerful. He looked like he had everything he wanted to be in a number 9. He played in that Inter Milan team during the early noughties. Then got a very bad injury. And after that, his career just kind of seemed to go downhill. And he never quite hit the heights that many predicted of him. I mean, he didn't have a bad career. I'm going to kind of looking at his stats.
No, I agree. He didn't have a bad career.
When you're being compared to the levels of Ronaldo, and he kind of got 27 goals for Brazil, which is a good return. That's a good international return. But you're talking about, this was a player who was meant to win Ballon d'Ors. He was meant to be challenging for the Champions League every year.
I agree.
And then by kind of 2008, so that was 12 years ago. So he's only 26. He was back in Brazil during the peak. Again, talk about a guy who coming into the peak of his career already seemed to be over. And for that reason, I just felt like he was a player that had so much more that he could have given, but never got the chance to show it.
No, I 100% agree. Those sort of early stages in his career at Inter Milan, you felt like he was an absolute monster. And then the injuries happened, and then it was never the same after that. It looked like he never really recovered. And then, as you said, like 26, he was back in Brazil at the age of 26. Like, yeah, his career basically just folded after that, really, which, was, as you said, we was expecting the second coming of Ronaldo, and it was a far cry from that in the end, really. Yeah, 100% agree.
Absolutely. Was he part of that World Cup squad for Brazil?
In 2002, he wasn't in part of that.
In 2002,
wasn't part of that squad. He was part of the 2006 squad that didn't make it. But he was. I mean, that Brazil squad was. They were saying he was going to be one of the key players into that tournament, along with kind of Kaká, Ronaldinho. This Adriano was going to be the centre forward of that unit, and he was going to be the one to.
Well, that was the thing
buy
as well.
them to the trophy.
Kaká and Ronaldinho were at their peak at that point as well, and as you said, he was going to be the centre forward in that. They had a much stronger team than where they ended up in that World Cup. But yeah, Adriano, he really could have been something special for a while. I thought he would have been, and then he just didn't. As you said, that injury happened, and by 2008, he's just back in Brazil, and the career's done. So yeah, no, I think that's a really good shout.
Yeah, I definitely considered him, like when I was doing some research to get it. So no, excellent pick. Okay.
Right, so again, my number 9, as I said, I do think it's very controversial because he was a really great player, undoubtedly. So I've gone with Matt Letizia. And what this simply boils down to, it's not about ability, of course, it's not about the amount of Premier League appearances that he got. What it really boils down to, and again, I suppose you could maybe put this argument for a lot of other players as well, but it's just the fact that, and I admire the loyalty of it, I really do, but it's the fact that he never left Southampton, and as a result, he didn't win anything. He barely got a look in terms of the England squad, when at that time, he was probably one of the most talented Englishmen around, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I just think to spend his whole career at Southampton, as much as he is a legend there, in a way that so many players are never legends at other clubs, it's a very small number of players that hit that level of status at football clubs that he's hit with Southampton. It's because he was, and no disrespect to Southampton here, but he was a level above what Southampton were as a club, and he really should have gone to somewhere like Man United or somewhere like that we're gonna challenge and compete for titles. And then it was I think it was back in a time as well when players were picked for England more so on their as much to do with their clubs more so than form. And if he'd have been playing for Man United, he 100% would have had by far a lot more England caps than he did. As I said, he really got kind of shafted in that regard. So yeah, for me, Matt Le Tissier, I kind of say, obviously great ability, great player. To his own right, he had a great career at Southampton. I just kind of think that he's not. I just kind of think that he could have done so much more with it than what he ended up doing in the end. So yeah, as I said, Matt Le Tissier for me, that's why I'm going wasted potential, just because I thought that he could have probably gone somewhere else and had a great career. So I don't know what you guys kind of think on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with. It's hard when you define wasted potential in that way, because he did play in the Premier League for his whole career. He scored 100 goals. I mean, he had a great career, as you say. He's a legend at Southampton. They couldn't speak more highly of him. But as you say, he could have.
They really should have a statue of him. I don't know if they do actually. But yeah, he could have done. He was that good. He's probably one of the most talented Englishmen to ever be produced.
Would you argue he was born in the wrong era and probably would have been rated higher these days than he was back in the 90s, when it was more about work ethic and rather than the ability, which it is now? I think in today's game he would possibly look better than he did, and he looked amazing then. But I think he probably I do think you raise a good point, actually. I do think you raise a good point, because obviously back then the game was, it's still a physical game, obviously, but it was much more physical. And I feel like people probably would have appreciated the talent he had a little bit more. As I said, I do think that probably the biggest factor was, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Southampton here, I think they're a very good club, but I feel like loads of people just took him as maybe being a good player in a pretty crap team. And in the same kind of way, like you look at, and again, I'm not saying he's anywhere near the legendary status of Matt Le Tissier for Southampton, because he's not, but I remember Clint Dempsey playing for Fulham, and he scored like 20 odd goals a season. And then when he went and joined Spurs, who were in and around the Champions League at that point, he never quite hit those heights, and people were kind of just like, oh yeah, well, he just looks better because he played for a crap team. And I kind of feel that Matt Le Tissier kind of got the same sort of treatment in that regard. And as I said, certainly from an England perspective, so many England managers would just look more at the top six, like the big clubs, and go, right, what are they doing? What English players have they got? Yeah, we'll pick them. And as a result, as I said, I do think he was probably very overlooked in terms of England, purely because he played for Southampton and not Manchester United, which is wrong, but that's the way it is.
For a player that across the career in First Division / Premier League scored 209 goals over 540 appearances, so that's a pretty decent goals to game ratio.
Oh mate, that's
Would you
a great
like to
goals
guess
to game ratio.
how many caps he has?
Can't be more than 10.
I was going to say less than 10, to be honest with you.
8
caps.
That's
Jesus
all
Christ.
he had across from 1994 to 1997. He has 8 caps. Now, you could argue that there were some fantastic
I was going to say,
players.
that era we were kind of blessed. You think Sheringham, Shearer, Cole, Ian Wright. Like, he was born into an era where English strikers were on top of their game. But he still should have had more caps than 8, let's be honest. He had that ability.
Yeah.
He couldn't have played Andorra or something. Like, just put him in the qualifiers, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, fair one. I completely agree, to be honest with you. He should have definitely had more than he got, 100%.
And his goal against Chelsea is one of my favourites still to watch to this day.
Oh, it's unbelievable, isn't it? It's unbelievable.
Goal.
Yeah, no, he just had such quality. I do think you raise a good point, actually. Probably was a little bit underappreciated back then, whereas today I feel like people would just be, there'd just be Twitter compilations of him if he was a player today, all over social media. There would just be clips of what he could do if he was a modern day player. So yeah, that was my number 9. And as I said, it wasn't due because of, anything to do with his ability. It's just purely because I thought that if he'd have moved to a bigger club, he would have won, as you said, probably everything, and he would have accumulated so many more caps than he did in the end. So yeah, Matt Le Tissier, my number 9. Moving on to number 8, Matt, who are you going with?
So my number 8 is, I don't think will be, too controversial. I mean, it's very retrospective of sort of, they were fantastic at one point, and it just went downhill. And it's almost one of those funny stories in football where it almost happened overnight. And it's Joe Hart. I think he had,
wow.
I know. I mean,
wow.
You're talking about a Premier League winner here. You're talking about someone.
Yeah. That makes me feel a little bit better about Mesut Ozil now. I'm not going to lie.
So from a young age, relatively speaking about goalkeepers, right? From a relatively young age, was thrust into a Man City side that did outstandingly well. Thrust into an England side that I think we all can accept had problems during this period.
Yeah, but I think that's the understatement of the century. Mate.
Yeah. But it's almost like someone flipped a light switch and it just went downhill. And if I had to define it to a moment, it's when the ball went through his legs. I can't remember who we were playing. It was so long ago for England. And it just seems to have gone downhill. He's had spells all over the shop. He came for West Ham for a while.
He was absolutely dreadful at West Ham, honestly. I could not...
I reckon the point it started going downhill for him was when he did the Head and Shoulders commercial. That was the thing that really got into him.
That was the exact moment.
You can pinpoint it pre Head and Shoulders and afterwards. That's when it really started going wrong.
He needed that dandruff for luck, and when the dandruff was gone, he lost
his
it.
Goalkeeping power and his dandruff.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting shout, Matt, because Joe Hart, I remember I think it was his City debut, quite clearly. Yep. They were playing Spurs, I think, and at that point, Shay Given was still on the bench, and Spurs really should have battered City that game. Yeah. It was around 2010, I want to say.
2010. I remember it so clearly as well. It was 0-0.
Yeah, me too. And I just remember he was absolutely incredible in that game. He was a wall. He was a wall in that goal. And I remember watching him and thinking, God, he must have been around 21 around that time. Yeah. And I remember watching it and thinking, this is the next England goalkeeper for 10 years minimum. Honestly.
If you look at his career then, he'd gone to Birmingham on loan the year before and was fantastic that season as well.
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant.
And I thought he should have started in the World Cup that summer because on form he was the best English goalkeeper that year. And then obviously
he was really good for Birmingham.
And then obviously that whole thing happened, and obviously then was thrust into after Rob Green's mistake. I think David James retired. Then suddenly everyone's going, Joe Hart is the next England goalkeeper.
Exactly.
But I think England has a big problem with goalkeepers of building them up to bring them down. You look at Jordan Pickford now; he's going through the exact same thing today that Joe Hart was going through kind of 4 or 5 years ago.
But I do kind of get what you're coming from, but I would also say that Jordan Pickford has not hit the heights that Joe Hart did.
But there is an issue whereby we seem to want the next young goalkeeper to replace the current goalkeeper, and then once they once they're in, wanting them to fail and starting to pick the next one. You'd think Dean Henderson, people are saying, should be in now. I think there is a problem with that.
I do think that's a very toxic trait, to be fair.
Yeah. And it's something England struggled with for a while. Just one thing, it's almost like most goalkeepers tend to have the peak later in their career because so much more of it is
about Joe Hart.
That's a very good point.
Joe Hart is 32, 33? That's a goalkeeper. That is absolutely no age.
He should still be in his peak.
That's no age for a goalkeeper. And now he's third choice at Tottenham. That is not where his career should have been. It's almost like
he's gone backward.
And even then, let's be real, he's only at Spurs because they need those homegrown players. Yeah. Like, that's the only reason he's there as a third choice. He's not even there on merit, let's be honest.
No, he's just moving around. And I think the problem for him is he's almost had a bit of... It almost feels like he's got a Benjamin Button career. Like, he had his peak when he was a kid. But on a serious...
I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah. And with what Simon was saying around, he was unstoppable, and you too, George. So much, I think, of being a goalkeeper in every position of football is about confidence. And because we've pulled him down from England, from the clubs that he's been at, like he was terrible for us, in that 17-18 season. He was atrocious.
Absolutely terrible.
But it's not good. It's not constructive. It's even worse when you're a goalkeeper.
No, completely agree. And I remember, to be fair, I was up until he played for us. Funnily enough, I was a big defender of Joe Hart. Especially because obviously he had that nightmare against Iceland at the Euros, and that was effectively what killed not only his England career but also his City career, because Pep Guardiola came in that summer and said, don't want him, not interested. And then he brought in Claudio Bravo, who was an absolute shit show. At Man City. He could not catch a cold. There was a point where I think he faced about 8 shots in a row that all went in, Claudio Bravo. And I was sitting there going, well, you know what, Pep, and this was obviously before he won the league, and I still had a few doubts about him. And I was sitting there saying, well, you know what, Pep, it's all well and good having a goalkeeper that can play out the back, but if he can't even catch the ball, it's useless to you, or it was worse than useless. And when we got him on loan, at that point, I thought he was an upgrade on Adrian, and I was super excited. I thought, he had that spell at Torino, obviously, that season before he came to us, but I thought, no, we've got a Premier League winning goalkeeper here, who's really should be at this point at the best years of his career coming into. And then it was just a complete disaster. He was so poor for so many of the goals we conceded. And then obviously, rightly so, he got dropped for Adrian again. And then when he didn't go to the World Cup that year, he kind of had the gall to blame David Moyes for not picking him when he was absolutely dreadful. And he's never really recovered since then. Obviously, he had a little stint at Burnley last season, and I know what you mean, because obviously he has achieved great things in the game. He's won Premier League titles, he's won FA Cups, he's won League Cups. He's probably Manchester City's. Obviously Ederson's still there at the minute, so that might change by the time Ederson is finished at City. But he's probably City's greatest ever goalkeeper at this point, and just to completely have a downward spiral like he has. I do think it was something that 4 or 5 years ago would not have seen coming at all. In that kind of sense, as I said, he has achieved a great things in his career. But 4 or 5 years ago, I thought he would have gone on and won even more Premier League titles, maybe even gone on and win, a Champions League. And I still certainly thought that he'd have been the number one at Man City. So to be the third choice at Tottenham, that is a complete dip, and you kind of think he probably would have thought that he would have been capable of more than where he is now. 100% he would have thought that he would have been, if you'd have said to him 5 years ago, you'll be the third choice at Tottenham, he'd have laughed at you. 100% he would have done.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think he was a bit of a all-around disappointment, and that's
in the last few years, certainly. Okay, so I think that was a really interesting take, to be honest, Matt. So, all right then, moving on. Simon, your number 8, please.
Okay, so I think my number 8 is probably my most controversial, purely because he's not finished, and he could come back, but at the minute his career is going in the wrong direction. Dele Alli.
Wow, this is a good one. I like this.
Oh, wow, I love that take.
For our viewers at home, George has just ejaculated.
No, I think that's a very good take. Okay, Simon, explain.
So obviously, Dele Alli, 18-19, gets a big move to Tottenham, £5 million. And for the first 2 years, looks absolutely worth every penny, and Tottenham have got the bargain of the century.
Oh, he was incredible.
Scored, I think, 20 goals, or 15 goals, didn't he, that first season? As a 18,
like
19-year-old kid.
To be honest with you,
looked...
he reminded me of Frank Lampard. Yeah. In terms of his positioning and getting into the box, I genuinely thought those first 2 years that by the time he was going to be done, he would have had a similar kind of goals to game ratio that Frank Lampard had from midfield, because he had it all really. He had a great positional awareness to get into the box. He always seems to be in the right place at the right time, which is rare enough for strikers in a lot of cases, but for a midfielder. And he could play, he was technically gifted, he had an eye for a pass. As you said, there's still obviously time for him to claw it back, and he has to move. Let's be real. Mourinho doesn't fancy him.
This is what I was going to say. I think he can recover his career, but at the minute he's frozen out at Tottenham. He's playing behind second fiddle to a lot of players, and he looked completely out in the cold. And I don't quite know. I can't put my finger on why it happened. Really, he had a couple of injuries, didn't he? But he looks
he had a
completely
few
different
injuries.
player. I mean, Mourinho made that joke, didn't he? Of, oh, where's Dele Alli?
Yeah.
Are you his brother? Like, that was where he was at in his career. Like, he'd lost all the ability to score goals. He didn't look confident. And he now doesn't play at all. And it's really sad because he's only, 24? He should be coming now into his peak and starting to dominate games for club, for country. And he's completely out of the game. And it's sad to see because I really liked, as you say, I liked the look of him when he broke through. Big player, loved to get on the ball. Scored big goals, didn't he? He scored against Chelsea.
Oh, he did.
He loved the big games. He scored big goals, and now he's just not even remotely on anybody's radar.
Well, he had
that
great partnership with Kane. I completely agree. He had that great partnership with Kane that seems to have, obviously now it's Son and Kane. Talking in 2020, and he's gone right off the boil. I'll ask you this: do you think that part of, obviously he's had a few injuries, so we've got to put that out there. But do you think part of his almost regression has been, down to attitude, or do you think, maybe it's a little bit harsh to throw that at him?
I think it's hard because we obviously don't see him day to day to kind of judge that. His attitude on the pitch since Mourinho took over.
Do you think the Prime documentary kind of opened some new eyes to it though? Because
I would. Yeah, just to follow on that, I think you're right. Mourinho doesn't dislike him as a player. I think Mourinho I think Mourinho actually likes the way he plays. I think the thing he hates about him is that he comes across as lazy. He doesn't do a lot of running.
Yeah.
He doesn't run back. He doesn't, he doesn't put in a defensive shift when you need to. And those are all things that Mourinho likes. Now, we can do a whole nother 1,000,000-hour podcast about Jose Mourinho. But
we could.
What I agree with you. He's not. He hasn't really had great spells under Mourinho right now, and Simon, it is too early to call. Ultimately,
yeah, it's one of those choices that's either going to age like fine wine or age like milk. Ultimately, but yeah, no, I do think that's an interesting shout because, as you said, he is kind of on that path. Obviously, he's not too far down it at the minute. There's still time to get his career back on track.
I think it's do or die time for Dele Alli now. He needs to decide right now how much he wants this. Is he prepared to go and make a bold move and move somewhere else and get maybe less money? I don't know, whatever. But he now needs to decide, am I going to put the work in to get to the levels that it looked like I was going to get to? Because I think a little bit what happened was teams started to work out Dele Alli, how to play against him, which is
a little bit,
it's what happens as a top player. You then need to find the answers to stop that working. You look at, I think teams for a while thought they worked out Ronaldo, but he then found a way to up his level even more. And that's how you become world class, is you keep striving to be better and better, and it's now his time to decide whether he wants to do that or not. And that's down to Dele Alli.
Yeah, no, I think you summed that up perfectly there. Right, so, okay, then moving on to my number 8. I have gone with one that, it's probably the most deserving out of it's definitely the most deserving out of the previous two I mentioned. I've gone with a good old chestnut that is Federico Macheda. Now, obviously the main reason why he's in here is because he came on for Manchester United at, what was he, like 17, 18, 19, around that kind of age. He scored that great winner against Aston Villa so that Man United won the game 4-3. It was one of those typical Man United, they didn't deserve to win the game, but it was around that Fergie time. And, he scored that great goal and everyone thought, wow, like this kid is going to go on and he's going to be at Manchester United for years and years and years to come. And he's going to score all these great goals. And then after that, it almost seemed like it just completely fell off a cliff after that. I've got it here. He had loans at QPR, Doncaster, Birmingham, Nottingham Forest. And even before those loans, where he never really made a great impact to any of those clubs. Even before those loans, whenever he was rolled out off the bench from Man United again, or even in cup games that he started, he never really had such an impact again. And as I said, even though, it was on the basis of that one game against Villa that the hype was through the roof for him. But he looked like he was hyped to the moon and back, and he looked like he was going to be an absolute megastar. And it never materialised. As I said, after that, it was almost like, I don't know if part of him, had seen what everyone was talking about and then couldn't live up to the expectations of that, whether that's a big part of it. But yeah, to be honest with you, I just thought, this guy is going to be amazing, and then it just never happened. I mean, I don't know what you guys have to say on that.
Yeah, I remember watching that game against Aston Villa, and it was a great goal, wasn't it? He turned the defender inside out.
Yeah, it was a brilliant goal.
Bent it in the corner, and that basically won them the league title, didn't it? It was a really important goal. I don't think I ever saw enough of him to say that I ever thought he had the ability. I mean, obviously he came on for that one game and did well. But I don't remember ever seeing another game where I thought, yeah, that guy really looks like he belongs to even be a Premier League player.
And is that
and I think the record seems to show that.
Time, or?
Possibly. It was a bit of a weird one because, it was that Aston Villa game that really did it. But Man United persisted with him for years, in that, not that he really got loads of game time, because he didn't really, but as you said, whenever he was rolled out after that, he never really performed to the point where you would go, oh yeah, he looks really good here. But for some reason, for a good 4 or 5 years after that, he was still at the club, he was still at Man United. At worst, they were loaning him out, and they did really persist with him. And as I said, it was one of those where his career just never took off after that for some reason, to be fair. And yeah, he just never really had an impact on... I can't really remember having an impact on any football match again after that, despite that explosive start, which, as you said, it basically won them the league that year. I think that was the Liverpool were chasing in 2009.
With Torres and Gerrard, it was that year.
Yeah.
So, do you think that he was probably thrust too early into the limelight? He had a massive moment, which he was probably never going to live up to if he had a career... Yeah.
I think that's probably a big part of it.
Even 20-year career. Like, he could never have as big a moment as that again, possibly. You look at where United are now.
No.
Like, he scored basically the title-winning goal.
Yeah.
He was like 18. He was never... The moment... He had the big moment, career-defining moment.
Yeah, I do think that plays into it. Yeah, I agree. I do think that kind of plays into it because, as I said, like, every time I saw him, for a good maybe 2 years or so after that, as you said, he didn't do anything of any note, but for the 2 years following that game, every time they would throw him on off the bench or every time he would start in a League Cup game, I would be sat there thinking, oh, am I going to see something great again like that goal? And it just never happened. It never happened. So, yeah, for me, as I said, that's my number 8. He's definitely, had, pretty much, at least of the players that we've probably spoken of so far, he's probably had the worst career out of all of them. So, yeah. That's my number 8. I don't know if we want to stroll on now into the number 7s. And Matt, your number 7?
My number 7, in my opinion, deserves to be higher on the list. But it's Mario Balotelli.
Nice.
A
nice shout.
That, I think we discussed him slightly the other day. But, he's played a lot of games in the Premier League. He was so, he spent a good amount of time at Man City, never really, showed something, and I think was definitely a bit of a cult player.
100%. Yeah, he was.
He was sold to Inter Milan for, in 2010 for a reasonable amount, and it never really shone there, and hasn't really shone since. I think where even is he now?
Was at Brescia last I heard about him, but I think he was released from there at the end of last season. So no, I actually don't know where he is at the minute.
Is he in a park in East London?
Well, let's hope he's had his antihistamine tablets, because remember that time he was allergic to grass and couldn't come on as a sub?
Oh God, yeah.
There's so many good Mario Balotelli stories. I mean,
it was just...
It's a player you love to watch. He was box office, wasn't he?
He was.
Like, he lived for the big ones.
I loved Mario Balotelli. I honestly love Mario Balotelli. He was such great entertainment value all the time.
On and off the pitch.
For me, but both off and on the pitch, to be fair. You never knew what you were going to get with him. And for me, I think one of the best things he ever did was, obviously, it was the day before Manchester City won 6-1 against Man United in that 2012 season, and it was the fireworks night, and he just set the fireworks off in his bathroom. And then the next day he turns up, scores the goal, the why always me goal. The next day he's campaigning as like for fireworks safety. And it was just typical Mario Balotelli. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, we did speak on him in the first episode about how the only assist he ever got was the assist that won them the title in 2012 for Aguero's goal. No, I 100% agree with you that though, Matt, because for a long time I thought he was going to be the best striker in the world. I think he had all the technical ability he needed. He was big and strong. And, you go back to that 2012 Euros against Germany, the goals he scored, he was the difference maker in that game. He took that game by the scruff of the neck. He did.
He scared people. You didn't want to
play
because he had
all the attributes. He had all the attributes to make a world-class striker, but ultimately the attitude and the dedication, it wasn't there. And he slipped through the cracks, and obviously, he had a decent spell at AC Milan after leaving City. Went to Liverpool, and it atrociously, didn't work there. And
I
then had spells in Marseille and Nice.
Yeah, and I think after that Liverpool spell, that was when people decided that he was just not worth the effort. I think before that, people were like, you can take the off-field stuff because on the field he produces the goods. But after that, it was like the returns in his performances are not worth the effort I'm going to have to put in to keep him entertained, to keep him level-headed.
Yeah,
it's just not worth my time to do that anymore. But I agree with you. If he had his head screwed on, he could have gone as far as he wanted to. His ability was undeniable. He beat people. He was quick, strong, great strike on him, powerful. He could have gone right to the top, but it was only him that stopped him. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I completely agree on that. And as you said, that Liverpool season, it was when people really started going, he's not worth it anymore. Because, for all the troubles at Man City, like he'd get sent off and there'd be all these off-field stuff going on, how his mum sent him down to the shops for some milk and he's come back with a Sky Electric set and 20 grand's worth of crap and forgotten the milk and arrayed £100,000 worth of parking tickets because he's just parking wherever he wants in the time that he was in England. All that baggage, but then on a Saturday you'd turn up and he'd score a great goal and win City the game, and you'd be like, so the good comes with the bad with Balotelli. But then from Liverpool there was only the bad, and that was when all the big clubs were like, you're just not reliable enough for us to take a chance on you anymore. So yeah, I do think that was a great shout, to be honest with you, Matt.
Absolute nutter and
completely
amazing for the game. If we had to do, I think we should
great
do a pod around who's the most entertaining players to watch, not from not from skill perspective, but just a bit of shithousery.
I love it. Yeah.
But So Simon, what is your number 7?
Okay, a little similar to Dele Alli, but a bit further on in his career, and I think you'll agree that he potentially deserves this more than probably Ali did. Luke Shaw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go on.
People forget.
I like this
people
one.
Forget.
I like Manchester United.
Yeah, people forget how young he is still. I mean, I've just looked it up, and I thought he was older than this. He's only 25, which is still, that's mind blowing to me because he was 17.
I can't believe he's only 25.
He was 17 when he came through.
I can't believe he's only 25.
But again, he's a player, and I think you can pinpoint his career where it started turning for him down to that double leg break. I think was it against Ajax in the Champions League. He was ripping it up for Man United at the start of the season. It looked like he was finally getting used to being a United player.
I completely agree. He looked like he was going to be England's left back, didn't he?
Well, he looked like a young Ashley Cole. I mean, let's be honest. He had that ability. He was He was quick on the left. Great delivery. I mean, you look at some of the crosses. Still to this day, he puts in a good cross. But defensively now, he's such a liability. I mean, every time a defender runs at him, he doesn't get close enough. He looks slightly overweight. I don't know whether we want to get into that.
No, I know he does. He does. I don't think he looks fit enough to be playing Premier League level, which I know it's probably a bit ironic coming from a fat fucker like me. but I'm not being paid the money that he's being paid to play for Manchester United.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think he looks fit enough to be playing Premier League football.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think he looks too chubby for a Premier League player.
So for me, that's why. And again, he's only 25. There is still time for him to turn his career around. But you obviously look, United all through the summer were saying we need a left full back, we need a left back, we need a left back.
Yeah.
Signed Alex Telles, and that could well be the end of his United career in any meaningful way. And for me, that's kind of where I'm at with him. He seems like his career's at a bit of a crossroads now. Does he decide, look, I want to get fitter, I want to get stronger, and I want to get back to that level? At 17, he looked unplayable, didn't he? That Southampton team, he was bombing up and down, left foot. He was key to how they played. And maybe he does need to drop down a couple of levels. Maybe go back to a team maybe like Southampton. I know they're in the top 4 at the minute, but a team that maybe there isn't the scrutiny of Man United. Get himself out the limelight a bit and try and reform his career. Because it looked like he was going to be England's left back for 15, 20 years. And now at 25, he doesn't even make the squad. And you think how the lack of England's choices at left back are these days. You've got Ben Chilwell. Then you're kind of digging around.
Actually,
and then Luke Shaw isn't even mentioned as an option anymore. Which kind of shows where he's at.
You raise a great point there, actually, because as you said, I hadn't even really considered that, because you're right. At the minute, Ben Chilwell is England's only true left-back option. And obviously, I think he's a very, very good left-back. So I think we're, as long as he's fit, we're okay there. But, when you look at the kind of options we've, say, maybe even got a right back, and then compare that to left back, and you kind of think, as soon as that Chilwell can't play the game, we're having to put, a right foot or a right back or a right footed player in at left back.
Or a left winger in Saka's case on the left wing back.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind
exactly
of what we're talking about.
And all I was going to say was the other thing to think about with Luke Shaw is Manchester United have had a habit in recent years to put a lot of pressure on players that aren't really up to speed. There's that expectation of United to top 4 competing for Champions Leagues. Luke Shaw isn't the player that's going to do that, and if anything, I think staying at United's only going to worsen his confidence, worsen his playing availability.
But I think before that leg break, he was starting to look like a player who was going to win Champions League.
No, he
get
did.
To them to the top 4, because he did have that. I don't want to keep going on, but that his ability going forward was unbelievable.
Yeah, I 100% agree. He started really well at Manchester United. It's just, as I said, I don't think he looks fit enough at all. And as you said, at the minute, he probably would be better off maybe going to a mid-table club and establishing himself there, because it just, to be fair, that whole Manchester United back line as of the time of recording looks atrocious, really, to be honest with you. So and it is a shame, because he did start off really well, and you are kind of right. He's at a point now in his career where he can still turn it around, but whether he will or not, we'll just have to see. But I think that's a really good shout, Simon. I don't know if anyone's got anything more they want to add to that.
Nope.
For my number 7, and I'm going to admit that this choice is still quite young. So as with, Dele Alli and Luke Shaw, there probably is still time potentially for this career to be turned around, but whether the player does or not. I have gone with Renato Sanchez as my number 7. So obviously, he started off really well in his career at Benfica, and then he was absolutely brilliant. He was probably Portugal's best player in Euro 2016. Certainly close to Ronaldo was obviously, maybe pips him to that title. But, he was like in the team of the tournament. He looked absolutely incredible. He got that great move to Bayern Munich, and then it just, like, the wheels kind of just completely fell off, didn't they? He went to Swansea, and there the biggest thing that he did of note was make a hashtag. And while Swansea were basically, staring relegation in the face, and he absolutely contributed nothing whilst on loan there, and I feel like his career has never really recovered since. Looking at the clubs he's at, and so he's currently at Lille. He went back to Munich for a spell, but before leaving Munich, I think He barely played in any of their games, and when he did play after the game, he basically just left straight away and was like, I want to go get first team football, which is fair enough. You can respect that. But no, he's currently at Lille, and he's still obviously really young, so there is still time for him to turn this around. But judging by how it's gone so far, I don't think that's going to happen. And it is such a shame because he looked like he was going to be an absolute monster in Euro 26, after Euro 2016. He played so well. So, yeah, for me, I'm that's kind of my prediction as much as anything. I've got my number 7, Renato Sanchez.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. It's very hard. Again, it's one of those that you'll either be proved very right or very wrong, as he's only 23. But he won the Golden Ball, didn't he? I mean, you've not mentioned. I don't think you mentioned that. But that.
God, no, he did as well. I'd forgot about that. He did as well, didn't he? Yeah.
He's talking about the guy was pegged as the best young player in the world. Like this is a guy who was meant to reach the highest heights, and you say it. And I remember when he signed for Swansea, there being absolute massive fanfare of. We have signed honestly, this I was so jealous. World-class midfield player, best young player in the world, and he's at Swansea. And 12 games and no goals later, his career looks as good as finished in a way. But it's very, very disappointing. Again,
I couldn't believe it as a West Ham fan when that was announced, even though it was only on loan, so you always knew that he was going to go back to Bayern Munich at the end of the season. I thought, Swansea, obviously, that team was pretty terrible that season, but you kind of thought that just his presence in that team alone, you kind of thought he would have, at the very least, dragged them to a mid-table finish, at the very, very least. Yeah, he didn't do anything, even, as you said, no goals, but even outside of the goals, he might as well have not been on the pitch. He didn't look interested, and, obviously he didn't care because he was always just he always knew that he was going to go back to Munich, but, he's at Lille at the minute, and for me, whether he stays there or whether he goes to a bigger club in time, only the future will tell us, but as of right now, I don't see him turning it around. So, yeah, I've gone with Renato Sanchez as my number 7, to be honest, because I don't think he's going to get there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good shout, George, and I think it's also a kind of a player that came through at a young age, and I think we're seeing a bit of a trend with that. Is that players, are coming through at young ages and they're being hyped to almost a ridiculous amount, and then just not really getting there, but
okay.
More time.
We'll roll on to number 6. Matthew, who are you going with your number 6, mate?
I shouldn't have to explain this one.
Okay.
So I'm just going to say the name, and then I'm just going to put on.
And we're all going to agree with you, are we? Is that how this is going to work?
I think this one, Ryan Babel.
Okay.
Someone that was who showed real success at Ajax. 2 Dutch titles. Okay, I know it's a Dutch title. He was a big part of the Euro under 2021 championships in 2007. I know that was a long time ago. Yeah. Went to Liverpool for what at the time was big money. 11.5 million pounds. You were expecting a decent level of player for that money.
Oh, definitely.
Especially when it happened. Never really took off at Liverpool. And then has kind of just been flopping around different clubs on loan. I think he was at Fulham last year. He's now at Galatasaray. Although, as things going.
Speaking of Ryan Babel, was he not in the Dutch side? Is he not still in the Dutch side?
Yeah, he was.
He's still in.
He still is, yeah. He's such an enigma, actually. Ryan Babel, I do think that's a really interesting shout.
I'll be honest, I've completely forgotten about him until Matt brought his name out.
No, to be fair, I'd considered putting him in, but then I was thinking, in my head, I was kind of thinking, how much potential did he really have anyway? But you do raise a good point, because at least recently he's been in the Dutch squad, and he was on loan. I think it was Fulham, wasn't it? A couple of years ago. He had the red... He had the red hair and it just looked atrocious, and his performances didn't look much better. But honestly, that was such a weird. That is a really good shout. I kind of think actually, he's very, very odd. His kind of career. That's a good shout, Matt. I think.
When you sign players from the Netherlands, it seems to be very 50-50, doesn't it? You can get absolute gems for a very good price, like Luis Suarez. Or you end up with like a Ryan Babel or Brian Ruiz, who it's hard to, as you say, the Dutch league is a bit of, it's a very good league, it's a very technical league, but it sometimes it doesn't translate very well on occasion. Sometimes players can come in and look absolutely like they deserve to be in the Premier League, but others come in and you're like, you've wasted a fortune, because they do like look after their youth talent very well in Dutch clubs, so that you have to pay big money to get them out of there. You look at fees Ajax have got for like De Ligt and De Jong, and I'm not saying Ryan Babel's on that level, but they do look after young players and get good price, and it can go one of two ways. You can get absolutely brilliant players, but also you can get absolute lemons, as it were.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. No, I think that's a really good shout, to be fair, because there's always been, I've never been quite decided on Babel. There's always been points where I've kind of thought, oh yeah, he is a decent player, and then there's been other points where I've thought, oh, he's absolute pony.
I think he's lazy as well, which always, again, he's one of those players.
Yeah, that probably doesn't help.
When a player is lazy, you always think you've got to produce twice as much as a player that works hard. Yeah. For people to recognise you as being a good player.
And almost to then justify your laziness in the kind of way that I don't think I ever saw Berbatov run in his entire career, but because he came up with the goods, you couldn't complain. You couldn't complain because he produced when he needed to. So yeah, I do think you raised a good point there. Right, okay. So that was Matt's number 6. I think that was a really interesting choice. Simon, who is your number 6? Who are we, breaking into those Europa League spots now?
So my Europa League spot, and he's in the Europa League currently, and we've already talked about him. So my number 6 is Joe Hart. So we had the discussion already about him. I think the reason...
That's a really good shout,
The reason why he's so high on my list is because I absolutely loved him when I was growing up, because I played a goal as younger, and I saw him at Shrewsbury very early on when he was on loan there, and I was tracking his career through the youth, through into Birmingham, through into the City squad, and then I really wanted him to do well, and then it's completely fallen apart, and I really wanted it to work for him, and it just looks like it's gone completely the wrong way, and it's really disappointing to see that lack of that talent, because he's clearly got talent. Like, I think people
definitely 100%
talk about Joe Hart and they say he's not a good goalkeeper. He clearly is a very good goalkeeper. His performances over,
or at least he was,
but I think he probably still is, but the confidence isn't there anymore. And goalkeeping, we talked about it before, goalkeeping is such about confidence, which is why you've got to admire people like Buffon and Casillas, who kept the levels of their game
completely
up over that length of time and didn't have that dip of confidence and form. And kept that.
I think confidence is so important at both ends of the pitches, actually, because you can tell when a striker's not playing with confidence, they get nowhere near scoring a goal, and goalkeepers let everything in that they really should be saving when they've got no confidence as well. Whereas kind of if you're in the midfield, you can kind of just play a few sideways passes and get away with it. But yeah, I do agree. I think his confidence over the last 4 or 5 years probably has, he's probably suffered from a lot of wounded pride, Joe Hart, to be honest, because 5 years ago he would not have predicted that this is where his career would be right now at 32. And yeah, I do agree. I think he was such a good goalkeeper for a good amount of time. He won titles with City, and for it looked like he was going to be England's number 1 for years. But it's just that this last 4 or 5 years or so, it's just completely it's spiraled down for him, unfortunately. But no, I think that's a good shout. Matt, have you got anything you want to add to this?
No, I think we've spoke about.
We did cover. We did cover it with your shout, didn't we?
So George, who is yours?
My number 6 is Alexandre Pato. Now, Alexandre Pato will probably always have a little special place in my heart, purely for the fact that for about 4 or 5 FIFAs in a row, he would always be the first player I signed on a career mode, because you just knew that he would become a 90 overall player. And I know it's probably a little bit harsh to, compare FIFA to real life, but he played at AC Milan for a good few years, and you're always just kind of thinking you've got the potential here to be a great, great striker. And he never really seemed to go anywhere with it. And then, and then I've got his career path here. So he started off at Brazilian Internacional, went to AC Milan. Then he went back to Corinthians. So straight away, he's still, really quite young right now. If he's even 30 right now,
31.
That he's going to be around that kind of
31.
age. 31, exactly. So, went back to Corinthians, not went back to Corinthians, but went to Corinthians, and, from AC Milan. So you think straight away, the career has not matched what he was capable of getting. Then he went to Sao Paulo and Chelsea on loan. And I remember him being on loan at Chelsea a couple of years ago. And again, he just had no impact there. When, you think of the potential that he had, it was just so disappointing. And then again, he had another spell at Villarreal, great club in Spain. You still had the time, you think that he still had a chance to maybe prove himself there and show that potential. But no, he didn't. And then he went to Tianjin Tiani. I've absolutely butchered that pronunciation, I reckon. And then now he's currently back at Sao Paulo.
And recently linked with Birmingham. I don't know if anyone saw that story.
Oh my God.
Did anyone see that story?
Not.
It was fantastic. Alexander Pato linked with Birmingham.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I don't know if I should give away, but he's actually my number 5. So maybe we can kind of bundle this.
All right, so we can merge that into your number 5 now.
We'll bundle this together.
Yeah, okay, that make.
I agree with.
He's my 6, your 5.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, actually, on kind of what you said so far. People were talking about this kid being the next. I know Lionel Messi wasn't that old, but they were talking about him being kind of that kind of level was what 100%. They were looking at, and that's what they were kind of measuring him against. As you say, for AC Milan, he looked early on unplayable. 50 goals in 110 games.
Yeah,
is a good record. That was a big. At the time when AC Milan were at kind of their peak of their powers, you think Seedorf, Gattuso,
they were still really good.
Like that, this was a great AC Milan team that he had to break into, and he did. And he was just looking at him, he's 31 now. So in 07, he would have been what? 17. So look, this shows what people were seeing in him. AC Milan, he was breaking through in that squad at that age. And he was scoring great goals. He got a really bad injury, didn't he? I remember.
Yeah, he did.
But as you say, he went from Milan to Corinthians. Again, 2013. So he was only 23, 24. And this is nothing against the Brazilian league.
His career is effectively going backwards at 23, 24.
It's not European league. It's a good league, but it's not the European leagues. That's where the big players play. And his career just never seemed to pick back up, and I don't know why that was, because obviously we don't see enough of Brazilian football over here, but why did he not have an impact back in Corinthians? Why at Sao Paulo did he not have an impact? You feel like if he had the talent that people thought he had, and it looked like he had, he should eventually have found something, particularly in lesser leagues. He should have been able to find that kind of spark again.
Oh, 100%. I 100% agree with you. I can't figure out why it never turned around. And as you said, 23, 24, he's at Corinthians, and you're thinking, well, mate, you should be coming into the peak of your career at this point, and instead you're taking the kind of move that good players take at the end of their career. And it just, I think he had so much potential. He looked such a good player, and it never really materialised. And then he had little stints at Sao Paulo and Chelsea on loan after that. And again, a little part of me, even though I kind of thought he was past it at that point, a little part of me kind of was excited to see if he could do anything at Chelsea, because, for a good 3-4 years, I thought Alexandre Pato was going to be unbelievable, and it just never really worked out that way.
Well, let's see if we can see him in the Championship at some point in the near future, Birmingham City.
I really hope so.
Oh, me too, mate. I would sort of be rooting for Birmingham a bit if that happened.
Me
like
too.
The old school Alexandre Pato, get a shirt with Pato on the back. Like, come on!
No, I 100% agree. Like, as I said, I know it is a little bit off topic, but, he would always be the first player for about 4 FIFAs in a row. He would always be the first player I'd sign, or because you just knew that he'd get to a 90 overall and you'd have him for over 10 seasons. So Alexandre Pato for me. He I think he deserves to be on this list. So then, scooting into your final Europa League spot, Matt, who are you going at number 5?
Number 5, I've got Micah Richards.
Wow.
So this is going back a bit, and I think
I can get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think he deserves to be kind of in the middle. And I think it's almost harsh to say it's wasted, because I feel like he had a really good attitude as a player.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I agree.
It was just the injuries, really. He broke through in that City team when he was 18. He was also the youngest ever defender for England in 2006. So he had a really massive breakthrough season, but that knee injury in 2008 kind of just spelled, the rest of his career.
Yeah.
And he's a relatively young, Pundit, that was the word I was looking for, thank you.
Yeah. No, to be fair,
he's a relatively young pundit.
Me too.
No, I think he is as well. Yeah. He's got a good understanding of the game, but, he's just, his career, from starting from England, being the youngest ever defender to, retiring at quite a young age it's just a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with everything you said there. It was basically the injuries, which I do remember for a good few years watching Micah Richards and just being so impressed. I did think that as a defender, he had almost the complete package. He was big and strong. I thought he read the game well. I thought he could do everything really. And as you said, and obviously at points playing alongside Vincent Kompany, like you've got a great pairing there. But yeah, the injuries, it was a shame. It just kind of ruined it for him a little bit, because when he did play, I always thought he was a very good player. And then, he ended up at Villa and it really didn't work at Aston Villa, let's be honest. They went down, but he was, at that point, the injuries had kind of taken their toll and his career was just winding down. So, he obviously won a league title with City and, probably an FA Cup and League Cup as well. But yeah, I did kind of think that, this guy has the potential to win, to be around for ages and win multiple league titles and multiple trophies and really cement himself as one of the greatest Premier League centre-backs of all time. And it just didn't materialise.
Right back, not centre-back.
Oh yeah, of course.
Sorry, no.
Yeah. But he could kind of play at both though at certain points.
And towards the end of his career, once he lost the pace, he did sort of move inside, didn't he? But early on, what I remember about Micah Richards was him bombing up the flank. Didn't he start as a striker? Yeah. I don't know if I've got that wrong, but I'm fairly sure I heard that because he scores a few good goals. I remember, he had the ability to get forward and score a few good goals. I think you talked about the injury.
I think maybe at youth level.
You talk about the injury having the effect. The other thing that you've got to remember is Pablo Zabaleta signing for City was the other. It was like a double-edged sword for him. He got injured. They signed Zabaleta, and Zabaleta, you talk about one of the greatest right-backs that the Premier League has ever seen. A lot of people put him in that kind of bracket. And that kind of, those two things together meant that he never ever got a look in anymore. You couldn't trust his fitness, and you got a guy who's playing out of his skin in his position. So that kind of meant that he never quite got the game time he needed. But I remember qualifiers for Euro 2008, which I know for England didn't go very well, but he cemented his position at right back. I remember he played most of the games in qualifying for that tournament.
No, you are right.
And we were talking about someone who you think he must have been 20 at the time. You think, well, the right back's sorted for 10 years. We don't need to worry. Micah Richards is going to nail this down. And it shows how important luck is in a career, and I don't think we've mentioned that.
Yeah.
For a player to reach their potential and for players to get to the world-class level, there is always a huge element of luck. You cannot get to that kind of position in your career where you've done it all and won it all without having luck on your side, because, as you've seen, these are not bad players. These are players that had different problems that stopped them reaching the level they should have got to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. 100% agree.
Okay.
I think Micah Richards is a really good shout. So moving into my final Europa League spot then, I have gone with David Bentley. Bend it's like Bentley. So obviously, we know how, he broke through. Obviously, he started off at Arsenal and then went to Blackburn, and where he scored that famous hat-trick against Manchester United. Obviously, Rio Ferdinand he had a pretty awful game. He really got the hairdryer treatment from Sir Alex Ferguson after that game. But I remember him scoring that hat-trick, and obviously all the comparisons came in. Bend it like Bentley. He's going to be the next David Beckham. Everyone was building him up to be, this insane guy. And, obviously, again, he had a really bad luck with injuries. Let's be real. And obviously, he moved to Spurs and the injury sort of came in and it didn't really work for him. But, there was that little period around the sort of Steve McLaren era that you really thought that he was going to be something special, that he was the next David Beckham. You know, he was a handsome fella as well, which obviously kind of helped push that David, and you know, he could score free kicks and crosses, so all those things kind of helped push that Beckham comparison, and it never really worked out. And I remember when he came on loan to us when we were in the Championship from Spurs in the 2011-2012 season. You know, I think he started around half a dozen games for us and then picked up another injury, and that was it. You know, he was out for the season. He went back to Spurs, and I remember being a little bit disappointed because, you know, a little part of me still remembered how good, you know, I thought he could have been when he first broke through. And, you know, he looked quite decent for us in the Championship, but then it never really materialised after that. He tried his luck in Russia for whatever reason. I don't know why. FC Rostov didn't quite work out. And then he had another loan spell at Blackburn before eventually he retired at around 28, 29. He really wasn't that old. And he just ultimately fell out of love with the game. So, yeah, I think that was a real big waste of potential because, you know, obviously the injuries took their toll. But he really looked like he was going to be this great, you know, successor to David Beckham. And it never happened.
I would have, just on a side note, I'd have loved to have seen some like behind the scenes footage of his time in Russia. I just feel like he wouldn't have fit in at all. But yeah, no, I think you've covered all the really key points with him. And yeah, I think whenever you're touted to be the next Beckham or in that ilk, you know, and you fall so short, it's a massive disappointment, right? It's a massive waste of potential.
Yeah, I'll still remember him for that 40-yard volley against Arsenal, though. That was an absolute world.
My God, yeah.
I think you're right. He was a good player. Yeah, no, I've got nothing more to add, really, than that. Those comparisons were probably too much for him early in his career. We do it all the time, even to players that aren't quite finished yet. People are already talking about the next Raheem Sterling and stuff. I mean, Raheem Sterling's still only like 25, so not looking for the next Raheem Sterling. We've got Raheem Sterling. Like, let players develop into their own person, and I think you can tell when a player's made it when they stop being the next somebody else and start having people being compared to them.
Yeah, I agree, and I always feel like when players do get labelled that, the next Messi or the next whoever, I feel like they never do hit that because it's an unrealistic and unfair expectation. But that's just the way, you know, I see it. So, all right, then moving into our Champions League spots. Number 4 then, Matt. Who makes your Champions League?
We've already spoke about him. Dele Alli.
Wow.
He's that high.
I can't believe you've both gone for Dele Alli. Stuff.
I think he's a great player. And that is why he's so high. He certainly can be.
He certainly can be a great player.
Exactly. That's what it is. It's you've kind of seen what he can do. And I think I put him so high, so harshly, because I feel like so much of it is down to attitude. He's never been too unlucky with injuries. He's had his fair share. Everyone has their fair share, right? But he's never been too unlucky with them. A lot of the reasons why managers fall out of love with him is because of the work rate and the work ethic. And I think there's always that difficult thing with any young player, right? You know, we're talking about people coming through when they're 16, getting put on big money, big contracts. And I think, you know, we've already said enough on Dele Alli, so I don't need to drag it out. But he's never really achieved what anyone hoped he would yet. Still time to turn it around.
I agree. I think we did obviously cover Dele Alli in length a little bit earlier, but yeah, I completely agree with your points. You know, I do think there is maybe a bit of an attitude thing there, but there's still time. Right then, so Simon, then your Champions League spot. Who are you going in your Champions League spot?
So number 4. This is probably too high, and I think you're going to be. I'm going to trigger a lot of people with this suggestion. This is coming. You talk about a World Cup winner. This is the only World Cup winner on my list. Paul Pogba.
I love it. So, I mean, I can 100% see where you're coming from. So, please elaborate.
So, I think, again, you look at a player who at Juventus looked absolutely unplayable. He was box to box. He was powerful. He ran with the ball. He scored goals from all over the place. But he clearly has an attitude problem. You look at his time at Man United, as soon as things are not going his way, He's throwing his toys out the pram. He's blaming the manager. He's blaming his teammates. He's not wanting to train. And for a player so you talk about a player who's £90 million worth of footballer, meant to take United to that next level, get them close to the levels of City and Liverpool at the era that they were kind of pulling away and hitting record points totals. He was meant to get them, raise them to that level. And he just hasn't. He's got nowhere near. And now he's at the point of his Man United career. And I know we talked about it when we talked about Paul Scholes last week. When he's behind Fred and McTominay in the pecking order of Man United midfield players. How can a player who's £90 million end up behind two good players, but they're nothing more than that? Let's not overhype them. They've got...
Yeah, they're decent.
They've got a good...
They're
What
decent.
they have got, which Paul Pogba doesn't have, is a work ethic and an attitude that makes them dependable. And you know that they're going to deliver for you week after week because even if they don't play well, they're going to try hard enough and get maybe 6, 7 out of 10 every game. Whereas Paul Pogba might get you a 10 out of 10 once every 3 months, but the rest of the time he'll be a 4 and he won't give you anything. And for a player, and you talked about Mesut Ozil having this problem, it's all well and good just having an impact against lower league sides and looking quite good against those kind of games. But the games where it really matters, it really counted, particularly at United, less so at Juventus, apart from that, because he did do a lot of good things for Juventus and for France. But again, he doesn't seem to want it at United. And again, if he got the move to Real Madrid, maybe we'd see the old Paul Pogba again. Maybe he would look like he wanted it again. But right now, I find him so infuriating because his talent is there, but he doesn't show it on the basis that he needs to. And his potential dictates that he should do.
Yeah. He's one of the players I would say from... I get on to Manchester United fans for ruining players because I think they do, along with Arsenal. But they... one of the things I see so much with Paul is that a lot of even United fans won't defend him because he's undefended. Because anyone can accept maybe a player's crap or this or that, but it's so obvious that he just doesn't give a shit.
To be fair to Paul Pogba, he's suffering from Real Madrid-itis right now, and that is a very tough thing to get over, Yeah. But no, to be fair, I kind of completely agree with everything you've said. I think the ability is absolutely there, and you look at, for me, like what he did for France in the World Cup in 2018. Yeah. It was just outstanding. He was the complete midfielder.
But that's the levels he should be at
tournament.
Every game. And that's
that is the issue.
The
we very rarely see it for Manchester United, and when we do, more often than not, it's against the smaller clubs. The only real big game I can think of him affecting was when Manchester United came from 2-0 down to beat City 3-2 that year. They got 100 points, and even then, the title was dead by that point anyway. It just stopped them from winning the title a week earlier. That was really about it. That's the only real time in a big game I can really remember Paul Pogba really having an impact for Manchester United. And I think he scored 2 goals in that game.
Do you just on an attitude thing? Do you think he cares?
Not about Man United.
No, not about Man United at all. To be fair, I always found this one a little bit weird, and I know it's a bit different. But they do say never go back. And obviously, different manager, different time. He was a lot younger and whatever. But I've always kind of found the move a little bit weird because obviously Manchester United were in decline when they bought him. And I know you could maybe argue that he felt that he was good enough to turn things around there. But I always kind of feel like he's never really wanted to be there. Again, I don't know whether he just went back because, Real Madrid weren't coming in for him at the time or whatever else. And obviously now he really doesn't look like he wants to be there at all. And, but at the same time, I would say he hasn't justified a move to a bigger club or I say to a bigger club. Manchester United are arguably the biggest club in the world, but he hasn't really justified that move to Real Madrid because he's just not been performing regularly enough
and I
for
think
Manchester
you see that,
United.
Don't you, now that the move to Madrid seems to have cooled, doesn't it? I don't hear the same
completely.
Transfer rumours about Paul Pogba.
They don't need another fouled Galactico, do they, Real Madrid? They've had enough of those players that have
They've got a club of them.
Superstars. But
you could make 11.
Yeah. You could. We could do our biggest, top 10 Galacticos or our biggest fouled Galacticos.
The biggest transfer plots would be a
good
list.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But Real Madrid could get its own list because there are so many big name flops there. But yeah, I completely agree. I 100% get where you're coming from with Pogba, because obviously, as you said, he's won a World Cup. He was fantastic for Juventus. But a little part of me, even from day one, I've always kind of felt, why did you come back? I know Fergie wasn't there anymore, and he left because they decided to play like Phil Jones and Raphael in midfield ahead of him, which, fair enough. I can get why you'd leave after that, but I don't really know if he really had anything to prove by coming back to Manchester United anyway.
Do you know what
Probably
it is?
a lot.
One thing, George. Money.
The money?
He doesn't, and that's why, George, we all have jobs, right? And sometimes you work a job that, you go, I can't be asked, and you hate it. But why do you go there every day? It's because of money. And why does he go every day? Because of money. He gets paid. But
he was on a fair whack at Juventus as well. It's like it wasn't like he got a shit ton more by moving back to Man United than he was on at Juventus. It probably was a bit more, but it wouldn't be like. It's not like he wasn't at life-changing money at Juventus.
No, of course not. Of course not. And I'm not saying it was all fueled, but
I still think
definitely
possibly though that Manchester United would give him an extra 100k than what he was on already, though, which is still
it's still money. And the other thing is, I think he might have gone there with good intentions and wanted to build the team up and bring back the old United and all that shit. But I think it's very quickly gone the wrong way with both, and his performance has reflected that. Consistently he's running the least on the field. Consistently he's not playing as a team. I think he's very concerned with Pogba the player. I honestly don't think he's concerned about Manchester United.
No, I agree. As I said, it kind of harps back to that point I was making, where I feel like even from day one, I feel like he's never really wanted to be there, and I think that's the reason why we don't see the him that plays for France often enough for Manchester United, because I feel like he wants to play for France, but I don't think he wants to play for Manchester United, and I don't think he has for a long time.
I would describe him as being very typically French. Like, when he can be bothered, he's fantastic. But quite a lot of the time, he just can't be bothered. And he looks like he's just there to fill up the numbers, and that's kind of enough for him. So anyway, that's why it's in my list.
Yeah, fair enough. So, okay then. So my number 4 is someone that we have covered already. Saido Berahino. For me, just because, again, we obviously spoke about it earlier, thought he was going to have a long England career. He was being touted for all these big moves, Spurs being the biggest one for 30 odd million, which again, like 6, 7, 8 years ago, that's big money, 30 million quid. And as we said, off the field, stuff's been going on, and his career kind of spiraled. There was a season where he didn't score at all, for Stoke, and they got relegated, and just absolutely poor. I feel like we kind of covered Saido Berahino as well as we could have done earlier. So moving on to number 3 then, the automatic Champions League spots. Matt, who is your third placed player?
Already spoke about him, Paul Pogba.
Oh, wow.
Had to put it in the list.
I love it.
We're on a wavelength there.
He's my 3.
Mate, you are. 100%.
We don't need to say anything. It's Pogba.
Yeah. We covered that literally a minute ago. Okay, then Simon, you're number 3.
Okay, my number 3. Potentially, this is a bit of an emotional choice, being an Ipswich fan.
I think I know who it is already.
Have a guess. Go and have a guess.
Connor Wickham.
No, it's
Connor
not.
Wickham. Is that who we're going with here?
It's not.
No. Oh.
It's Kieran Dyer.
Oh, that's another great shout though.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Kieran Dyer could have been amazing. He could have been fantastic. Now, I don't remember him so much playing for Ipswich. It was a bit before my kind of time following football. He moved in 99.
I mean, that's okay, mate. I remember him for West Ham, and I can add to this. So
but I can obviously remember. But I don't remember playing for Ipswich. But I know people who watched him play for Ipswich in that period.
Yeah.
And they talk about how good he was. 2-footed, quick, move with the ball, great passer, eye for goal. He got this big money move to Newcastle. I don't know what the figure was, but it was a lot for the period. But I mean, he was in the England squad the year after as well. He was in the England squad I remember he went to the Euro 2004, And you think of the players around the England squad at that time, Lampard's goals. I mean, this was real. Like, to get in that squad was really showed.
You had to be really,
him.
really good to make those squads.
But I think his issues, he had a lot of off-field issues at Newcastle. I think he was very young when he went there. It can't have been more than 2021 when he.
I feel like we have to. I feel like we have to talk about that classic moment where he had a fight with Lee Bowyer.
We do have to talk about it. And again, I think it's testament to him being a young kid who was. I mean, when he moved to Newcastle, he was still living with his parents. Like before that, like he hadn't moved out, so he was suddenly thrust into the fishbowl of Newcastle United, and like that is a big club. That's a club where football is everything. And I just think he was too young. He couldn't handle that. And as you say, there was on-field problems with teammates, and that was not a good look for him. And he has spoken very sincerely about that since he's kind of retired, and how much he said, look, that was bad. I was just in a bad space. I was had bad mental problems. And he could have been a great player had it not been one for injury. I mean, he had so many bad injuries throughout his career. It was not fair.
Believe me.
He lost a lot of what his game was about, which was the pace and the ability to run with the ball, which he kind of lost because he didn't have that anymore. And some off-field problems, being in Newcastle, struggling with being in that environment. And I think he could have been a really, really good player, and he didn't have a bad career, but he could have been much, much better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously around that time, he was kind of touted as the king of bling. That was kind of what the press put on him. And, it was all about, like the rings and all that kind of stuff and everything like that. So looking back on it now, actually, I do kind of think, it was probably an example of the press, say maybe... trying to focus in on a young, like a mixed race player to some extent. But as you said, there was stuff, within his control that, he didn't help himself with. I think that's a great shout, to be honest with you, because he did look like he was going to be a really good player. I remember when we signed him at West Ham, and it was around 2007, 2008. It was shortly after we were taken over by the Icelandic bankers, and they were starting to put money into the club. We got Freddie Ljungberg around the same time, and Kieran Dyer came in on huge wages for us, absolutely huge wages for us. But despite that, though, I remember I'd kind of not forgot about the injuries, obviously, but I kind of more remembered how good a player he was, and was super excited for that. And honestly, I think he was with us about 3 years or so. And in that time, I think he played about 10 games at best. And he was on the best part of 100k a week, which in 2008, that's unbelievable. When it just didn't work. He went to QPR shortly after that, around 2012, around 2013, around the time they got promoted. And I called it. I saw the starting lineup. He was in the starting lineup, I think, for the first game of the season. And I was like, he's going to get injured here, and it's going to be him done for the season. And it happened. And that, for me, was almost typical of Kieran Dyer, which is, it is a shame because he did have such great potential. But I think, for me, the injuries were the biggest part for him. He could never get fit.
I agree. And I'm just looking at stats. 33 games he played for England, which, again, you talk of the era he was in. The midfielders he was competing
but how many
against.
Injuries has he had as... Yeah, all the injuries he had at the same time to get 33 caps. But he really could have been something special, to be fair, but it kind of ruined it for him.
So just a great stat about Kieran Dyer. For West Ham, he never played 90 minutes.
That
doesn't surprise me.
And
oh my God.
By the time he was left, he was on £83,000 a week. Which
again, when did he leave? Was it like 2011 he left? Was it around that time?
Yeah, looking.
2011, yeah.
That's fine. So that's what I mean. For about 3 years, he was on £83,000 a week, not playing for, and that's bad enough in this day and age. I thought it was bad. Jack Wilshere being on 100k a week at West Ham in this day and age, but 10 years ago, 83k a week. Oh,
but there was a time when I thought he would have been worth that kind of money. It's obviously not at that point of his career. But
if he could have stayed fit, he probably would have been, because he was good enough, I think. But yeah, the injuries just. Oh, they've done him. I do feel bad because I do think it was more so the injuries than anything else. As I said, the King of Bling thing was, again, I think a bit of a press thing, trying to dig out, a young mixed race player, which we're still seeing today.
Going back to that kind of it's a media thing. He's now gone back to Ipswich. He's now become the under-23s manager there, and I've listened to him. He did an interview where he spoke about the game, and he clearly is you can tell his passion, you can tell his enthusiasm for the game, and how deeply he thinks about the game, and he thinks about his mistakes and what he would do with young players to make sure they don't have that kind of make the same mistakes he did early in his career and get them on the right path. So I think he probably was unfairly hunted earlier in his career because he's clearly a good lad. I think that was an unfair...
Yeah.
That moment on the pitch with Lee Bowyer, and everyone remembers that.
It can happen,
he got angry
it
at a
can
teammate.
happen.
It
Yeah.
happened. Unfortunately, it happened in a high-profile game on the pitch. If it happened on the training pitch, everyone's forgotten about it in a day. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
that's the way it goes.
Yeah, it was. I think it was on Sky that game, wasn't it? Which is, especially back then, it sticks with you. And obviously, again, Lee Bowyer was a bit of a character as well. And they've obviously, they were losing the game. They were both frustrated. It happens, but yeah, as I said, I do think, as you said, he does. I've seen him do interviews. I've seen him go on podcasts. He does seem like a really nice, down to earth guy, actually. And it was just a shame about the injuries really that done him in. But yeah, no, I think that's a great shout for your number 3. So going into my automatic Champions League spot at number 3, it's a player that we have already talked about. I've got Ravel Morrison in here, and it's purely in here just because, again, every time he got the ball, I felt like he could do something with it. I felt like he was going to do something amazing with it. He had that kind of aura about him. And I remember on my 18th birthday, we played Spurs and we won the game 3-0. And he scored that ridiculous goal from, where he carried the ball from like the halfway line and finished it. And in that moment, I thought he was going to go to the 2014 World Cup. I honestly did, because I thought if he's going to do this all season, he can't not be picked. But after that, it just completely tailed off, and he got nowhere near the England squad in the end. He wasn't even in the conversation because his form just dipped. We sent him out on loan to QPR. He ended up at a host of other clubs on loan and everything like that. And funnily enough, he's recently come back into the news, actually. He recently played for Jamaica in the most recent international break, finally giving them his allegiance, where he'd played for like England, all the youth levels, except, he'd never made his full debut. And yeah, I just think he was a player that really, as you said, Sir Alex Ferguson said that he's possibly the most talented player he'd ever seen at that level. And to, go on and effectively, be playing in Mexico when he should be in the peak of his career. Obviously, he signed for Sheffield United last season, barely got a look in. I don't know. I mean, he might have came on off the bench at some point. But yeah, just a complete waste of a complete waste of a career, to be honest with you. He really could have done and it's not even down to injuries, really. He could never really sort himself out.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and he's further down on my list. I had to put him lower because just purely emotionally, not based on any fact.
No, honestly, I did think that he could have been. I did think that he could have still been in the England squad right now, like back at the time. But yeah, it just didn't happen.
I can tell you, he's at ADO Den Haag these days in 2020. He's only 27, so as you say, he should be right now at the peak of his powers. But
yeah.
Nowhere near.
Yeah, nowhere near. Okay, then. So let's move into the runner-up spots. Matt, who takes your second place?
So mine, I think we could debate about his position. It's Phil Jones. You're talking
love that. No,
you're talking
love that.
You're talking about a player that at the age of 21, Alex Ferguson said, quote, "The way he's looking, he could be our best ever player." Which is massive.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
Massive props for a player that looks like he's never played football ever in his life, who looks genuinely afraid of the football.
I think you're being unkind to the bit there, because I remember him playing for Blackburn, and he was fantastic that year. Like, there was a reason he deserved that move on the back of that season.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm not saying that he wasn't I'm not saying he's been afraid of football, of a football his whole life, because that's absolutely not what I'm saying. But in recent years, he's looked petrified.
I mean, the memes are fantastic, let's be honest.
Oh, God, the faces.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great shout, to be honest with you, because for me, Phil Jones, that first season at Manchester United, I thought he did well. And I thought, he's going to be here. I mean, it turns out he was there for a while, so I suppose I was right.
Because they couldn't get anyone else in there.
Honestly, I thought he was going to be their rock at the centre-back, for years to come. And, I thought he was going to be one of these great players that the Premier League has seen. And, he's been an absolute I feel like mediocre is almost... I don't want to say giving him too much credit, but I feel like it almost is because... you're a Manchester United man, and he's never, for obvious reasons, for a little while now, he's been nowhere near close to first choice. And when he had that great season at Blackburn, you thought he was going to be incredible. And, as you said, Sir Alex Ferguson said that he could be the best Manchester United player ever. Not just, best Manchester United player that he ever managed or he ever saw. Best Manchester United player ever. So, you're looking at Bobby Charlton, George Best, Dennis Law at that point. And I completely agree. Obviously, I think he's been largely, I think at absolute best, he's been average at points for Manchester United. He's been there a long time, but I would probably put that down to the fact that probably no one that could afford his wages would want him, to be fair, and he's probably not been terrible enough to be released either. So
and Manchester United have had trouble with that position for
I think one of the big things that went about against Phil Jones, certainly early in his career, is no one could work out what his best position was, because he played at right back, he played defensive midfield, he played centre half, and that versatility.
I think that definitely hindered his career.
It gives you something early, but eventually someone's got to decide for him what's your best position. Let's start working on getting you to that level. I agree.
I 100% agree, and I think the worst thing for his career was trying to move him into holding midfield, because for me he just didn't have possibly the technical tools to do that role. I don't think he could relay possession well enough to do that holding midfield role. And as you said, he was kind of shoved from right back to holding midfield. I think that was the biggest mistake that managers of his had. I think they should have just gone, you're a true centre-back, because for me that was clear, and obviously that was where he started his career. That was where his biggest qualities were, in the centre-back role, and they should have just gone, you're not a jack of all trades, and we don't need you to be a jack of all trades. Let's just leave you at centre-back and let you blossom. And it never happened, and as you said, he was kind of pushed from pillar to post, and in the end, he kind of didn't end up being good in any position, because he was never given enough time in any of them. Yeah. So, for that, I kind of have a bit of sympathy, but, yeah.
And do you think he'd have probably had a bit more time to find his feet in the later stages of his career if he wasn't playing for the behemoth that is Manchester United?
That's always the way.
If he played for someone...
Possibly.
Yeah, if he played for someone further down the table that probably doesn't have the spending power...
If he'd stayed at Blackburn for a bit longer, or even gone back out on loan to Blackburn and had another year of development there as a centre-back, maybe that would have been important for him.
Even then, though, you've got to think, though, over the last 10 years, because, he's been there since, 2010, something like that. You've got to think, though, over the last 10 years, that, Manchester United in that time have gone out and bought centre-backs like Eric Bailly. They've gone out and brought Harry Maguire for world record money, of course. And you've got to be looking at those players. And if I was him, I would be looking and going, well, they've obviously bought those players for a reason. And now it is, you could understand, say, maybe trying to fight for your position. But when you're going out and spending £80 million on Harry Maguire, and you've been there 8 years at this point, and he can't have played more. If he's played more than 300 games for Manchester United, I will be shocked. He might have done, but that's what I mean. In 10 years, that's a terrible return. And I've got to be, if you're Phil Jones and you're seeing, as you said, all these big money moves for like Eric Bailly, Harry Maguire, and you've been there that long at that point, why are you going to stick around and try? All right, you could argue it's Manchester United, but I think from a playing perspective, for me, if I was him, I'd be thinking, well, they don't want me. They don't think I'm good enough because they've gone out and bought these players, and I've been here for so long at this point that's not really going to change. If he'd only been there a year or two, you can kind of go, oh, you know, fair enough. Like, I could still, you know, change their minds. But when you've been there 8-9 years and they're dropping world record fees on Harry Maguire, that would be sending me the message that they clearly don't think I'm good enough and I'm at best, you know, an understudy here. So, you know, if he's happy with that, then fair enough. But yeah, I think that's a great shout to the list, to be honest with you, Phil Jones. I don't, you know, there was much. People thought he was gonna be brilliant, and as I said, an absolute best. He's been average. That is the best I can describe him. Okay, so
all right,
okay.
Moving on.
So your runner up then, Simon. Who makes your number 2?
So my number 2, we've already spoken about him, Mario Balotelli. Just
love
great
that.
player.
I might as well say it now and say that Mario Balotelli is also my number 2 as well. So yeah.
There we go. I think we've said pretty much all we need to say. Well, can you ever stop saying enough about Mario Balotelli? I mean, there's always a news story and something to talk about with him. That's what makes him so entertaining. But he had so much ability. He should have done so much more than he did.
I 100% agree on that. But yeah, as you said, we kind of covered Balotelli already. So okay then, Matthew, your Premier League winner. Who takes number 1 spot for you?
This is the spot this is the trophy no one wants to win. And this guy, I feel like it's going to be on the tip of everyone's tongue. Jack Wilshere.
Great shout. Great shout.
Great player.
I did consider it.
Yeah, he's shown, you know, especially at Arsenal, or only at Arsenal. He showed, you know, there's some games where he's just unplayable, and he played so well. Showed not only great skill but great athleticism and just overall. Injuries, you know, it's just, you know, plagued his career. For most of his time at Arsenal, most of his time at West Ham. He, you know, the bad business was on West Ham's fault. I'm not going to blame Jack for taking a cracking deal on his side. Oh yeah, of course. But you know, had several injuries for us. You know, if you take away the injuries, most people, you know, probably not so much this season, but in previous seasons, would say that Jack should have been, you know, in our starting lineup if he stayed fit.
I agree.
But yeah, lacked, you know, just got quite unlucky with injuries. And, you know, when we released him this year, I think he probably thought that he would find another club a little bit easier than he has found.
Oh, yeah, he 100%. He 100% did. And I don't blame him for maybe, you know, bigging up his own ability, because obviously, as you said, he was a technically gifted player. I do kind of feel like for a long time, though, he did live off the hype of that Barcelona game, because obviously he was outstanding in that game, but it was one game. And, you know, he still, to be fair, he did show promise, you know, in other games, but nowhere near to the heights of that game. And I remember when we signed him, obviously by that point, he'd already been out on loan to Bournemouth and had struggled to get into their starting lineup. He barely played for them, even when he was fit. And I just remember there was a good portion of West Ham fans at that point that were excited at his signing. But at that time, we still had Andy Carroll, and I just thought, we don't need another player like this. Yeah. And, you know, sadly, it didn't work out, so much so to the point that they ended up cancelling his contract early.
How much do you reckon that cost? That must have cost an absolute fortune. I know he didn't have long left, but it would still be a bomb of money.
He had a year's left. He had a year's left on something like, I want to say
a week.
100. It was something. It was over 100 a week.
Talking about like
it was over 100 a week.
5 and a bit million quid.
Yeah, basically, possibly even more. I don't want to say no. It wasn't on 150k, but
it was like 130, I think, George.
Something like that was it. Oh god!
I mean, whoever his agent is, fucking bravo, because we got conned. We got scammed.
Well, we got him on a free, didn't we? We got him on a free, and that was probably why we were able to pay his wages, because we weren't paying Arsenal any kind of fee for him. So that was probably how they would justify the wages. But yeah, it didn't work out, and it's a shame, because obviously the talent was there, obviously. It was just the injuries. He had glass ankles, basically. And as you said, I do think it says something that, he's still struggling to find a club now because, the talent and the technical ability is obviously there. But why, you're just going to be paying out of pocket for no return. He's just not going to be fit enough. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, I think the best thing he can do for his career is, and it's crazy that we're talking about, a player that's not actually that old.
No, not at all.
He's still in his 20s. He's 28.
I think he's 29. I think he's 29 now.
He's 29. He's 29
so he should
January.
be in his peak. Yeah, he should be in his peak then.
Yeah, and he's just, great player. And I think what Arsenal lost, which, I wouldn't be surprised. I personally think it would be decent business if they Arsenal try and get him back in the club somehow.
Really?
Because No, not to play, but
you mean from like a coaching
perspective, because what he has is bags of passion, and that's something that I think Arsenal's lacking massively at the moment. So I wouldn't be massively adverse to him, or I wouldn't think it'd be a bad move for him to go into like coaching or something like that. But his playing career, from where we thought it would be, is a million miles off.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, that is a shame. No, I think, to be fair, that's probably a worthy winner, actually. I did kind of consider Wilshere, but then...
Is he not even in your list?
No, he's not, to be fair. But I did consider him. I don't know, like, maybe because he was injured he was almost injured for so long, my potential, or at least my thoughts on what he could become, was almost completely ground out very early on because of the reliability factor. Whereas obviously we talked about players like Kieran Dyer with injuries and a few others. I always kind of felt like they always got maybe a little bit more game time than Wilshere did and stuff. Whereas for me, as I said, by the time he signed for West Ham, and I always want to be proven wrong when I have a negative thought about a West Ham player or manager or whoever, but as soon as we signed him, I was not even remotely excited at all. And it's just because, as I said, I just had no faith that he would stay injury-free. Yeah, I think that's probably why I probably didn't, think so much of his potential, because that potential is almost irrelevant if they're never going to be able to get on the pitch. So, yeah, but I did think about him.
Yeah, he made a short list of mine, but again, I think partially as well, because he's a West Ham player. I know you guys can speak with a bit more kind of... more, because you've seen him more. That's partially, again, why I didn't include him.
Yeah, fair enough. So, all right then, Simon, your Premier League winner for the wasted potential.
My Premier League winner for wasted potential, Paul Gascoigne. That's who I've got.
Okay, so before you elaborate any further, that's my number one as well. And I'm so glad you picked it, because I feel like Newcastle and Spurs fans might be slightly triggered by this. But please, elaborate and I will add.
So, Gazza's technical ability is there for all to see. You watch footage of him, he's unbelievable. I mean, his ability to run with the ball, beat people, that goal he scored against Scotland at the Euros, fantastic. Italian 90 was ridiculously good. He didn't really play at the real top level. He never... I know he was at Spurs and he was at Newcastle, but by his peak he was kind of at Rangers, wasn't he, for kind of a long part of his career?
Yeah.
And if he'd had the ability to stick at it and work hard, which is something that... and that he didn't have all these off-field problems with the booze and the women and all the other vices that he kind of got involved in, he would have played... He could have played for any club in the world. Let's be under no illusion. His technical ability was that good. He could get up and down. He made good tackles. And I think if you look at his kind of honours, major honours, he won a League Cup with Tottenham, and there's not too much else to write home about. And for a player as good as he was, that feels like a real waste.
I 100% agree with everything you've said, and that's pretty much why Gazza is my number one as well. Just because when you talk about the talent and the technical ability, there's even players that have won World Cups and stuff. Obviously he wasn't part of that World Cup winning squad because that was way before his time. But you could argue that he was possibly better, at least from a technical point of view, than anyone that played in England's World Cup winning squad. And, right, we did have that horrific leg break, obviously. But, as you said, all the off-field stuff. It was all the booze and that. I did, everyone that ever played with him obviously loves him, harps on about how good he is, and there's no denying how good he was because he was a phenomenal footballer. He had so much technical ability. He had a bit of everything. He was just a genius on the ball. That's the best way to describe it. But when you think of people getting the most out of their career, I saw an interview with Colton Palmer. And Colton Palmer basically said that he got the absolute maximum out of his career that his talent allowed him. And I feel like Gazza probably got possibly the absolute minimum out of his career that his talent would have allowed. Because as you said, like one FA Cup, I think, for Spurs, and that's it. He scored that great free kick. And that's really all he has to show for his career. He obviously scored that great goal against Scotland at the Euros 1996, and he could do wonderful things with a football. But if he had the work ethic of a Cristiano Ronaldo, I genuinely think we'd probably be sitting here talking about potentially putting him in the conversation for being one of the greatest players of all time. But, he did live life to the full in that kind of sense, and he mucked about. And as I said, obviously the injury was horrific for him, and that obviously did play a big part in why he didn't fulfill his career. But all the drinking and all the off-field stuff, even post-career, he's one of those players that, I like seeing him on the telly, and if he looks healthy.
Unless he's
so often,
talking to Raoul Moat.
Honestly... Yeah. Honestly, he's younger. Yeah, that sums it up. Going up to help Raoul Moat as he's in a standoff with police, and it's just, I look at him, and he's younger than my dad, but he looks about 15, 20 years older than him, and that, as I said, it just comes from all those years of abuse, and obviously he does need help, Paul Gascoigne. But for years now, I've just been kind of set that one day I'm going to look on social media and it's going to come up, Paul Gascoigne has died, and it's been, that, and it's kind of been that way for, 30 years or so now.
I remember it was a similar thing with George Best, wasn't it? It was, you just know it's coming.
100%.
The abuse is so much. I think the only manager who ever managed to get the best out of Gazza was Bobby Robson for England.
Yeah, that was it, 100%.
And I think what he did, the way he managed Gazza, was to kind of let him be a bit loose and be a bit free.
Yeah.
And I think people who tried to rein him in, that was not going to work. Gazza's too much of a character.
I agree.
Give him rules, he's just going to break them. So let him go out, let him do his stuff, and then he will perform on the pitch. And that's the risk, the trade-off you've got to take. Talk about Mario Balotelli it's when does the off-field
100%.
stuff become bigger than the performances? That's when there's a problem.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. Bobby Robson kind of channeled that. As you said, if you set restrictions for him, he wasn't going to follow them, and you just wouldn't get the best out of him. Whereas if you let him do his thing, you would know that when he turned up to play football on that Saturday, you'd see a phenomenal performance. And it was interesting that you made the comparison to George Best, but obviously because it's a very similar path, and as I hope that Paul Gascoigne's story doesn't end the same way that George Best's did. But when you look at them as players, at least George Best, and obviously he did play a little bit earlier, but obviously Gazza came through at a point when the drinking culture, obviously it was just about to die, but it wasn't quite there yet. And at least George Best, from a footballing perspective, he won league titles. He won a European Cup. Obviously, he played for Northern Ireland, so he was never really going to have great international success. But at least he won titles, he won a European Cup, and he went down as one of Manchester United's greatest ever player, potentially, their greatest number 7. If you were making a list of top 10 Manchester United players, you can't not put George Best in there. But if you were making probably a top 10 list of, say, Spurs, Newcastle United players, Gazza probably doesn't make that list. To be honest, if you're going on technical ability alone, he probably would. But if you were considering, like impact on the club and longevity and all that, he probably wouldn't. He wouldn't be on either list, to be fair. And that's a shame. Whereas at least, despite all the off-field stuff, George Best was able to, win things in his career. Gazza never really had that, and it's a shame because he definitely had the ability that was there. So, but I think that just about wraps it up, to be honest.
Yeah, I think just one last thing I think I'd say is I'm not sure if with Gaza, if he would have had the same career if maybe he was playing in the modern day. And I think the reason I say that is because I think he did suffer with a lot of mental health and mental illness issues that maybe would, and he was playing in a time where people didn't really like talking about that sort of thing, and it was kind of just like kind of a more get on with it attitude. So I think he definitely needed help.
Yeah, he would have been looked after better these days than he was back then.
Yeah, and he might have had a better career. He might have been able to get on it earlier, have, the different sort of outlook on just his career and the way everything went.
I do think, though, it's a bit weird. It's a bit funny that you mentioned that, because I almost feel like a player like him, unless they were drastically different at the infancy of their career, so, as they're coming through being signed with their first professional contract, I feel like in this day and age, he wouldn't even make it as a professional, not because he wasn't good enough, but just because the attitude, I feel like maybe lots of clubs
discipline
might have just binned him off and gone, he's not worth it. We can't control this guy. Whereas obviously, as I said back then, the drinking culture was still a thing and whatever. So him wanting to go and do his own thing wasn't too much of an issue. It wasn't out of line with the norm. Whereas now you kind of have to be a model professional in order to make it, even before you've signed your first contract. So, but having said that, I do think you're right in that if he had signed that professional contract, he probably would have been looked after better, because there's obviously Gazza's obviously got a lot of demons going on in his life, and as I said earlier, we can only hope that we're not sitting here talking about him in the way that we talked about George Best and how his life ended.
Yeah,
I think that just about covers it, guys. Have we got anything else we want to add at all?
absolutely.
Nothing else, Chad.
Yeah, no worries. All right, brilliant. This is us signing out then. That's the final whistle. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Midtable Up Podcast. If you enjoy our top 10 lists, please make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Let us know what you would have done differently. If you watch this episode on YouTube, make sure to put your foot through that subscribe button and leave a like on the video, as well as follow us on Spotify and the Podcasts app to keep up to date with the series. Thank you very much. See you next time.